If you get the unsolicited ballots, send it in and then go make sure it counted. And if it doesn't tabulate, you vote. You just vote. And then if they tabulate it very late, which they shouldn't be doing, they'll see you voted, and so it won't count. So send it in early and then go and vote. And if it's not tabulated, you vote, and the vote is going to count.
Oh my goodness. There is no pretense, no shame in the devil's game. Welcome everybody to Stir Crazy. This is episode number 84, I believe. Trump is trying to steal the election, and I don't think we have to do too much wondering about the try part. I think we are more in a position of Trump will steal this 2020 presidential election, as we are less than 2 months away from the big day. As you heard right there, Donald Trump yesterday informing his supporters to go ahead, test the system. If they send you an absentee ballot in the mail, fill it out and also show up to the polls on the day of election. Now, of course, this is illegal, but we know Trump and his cronies are they don't worry themselves with such annoyances like the law. They just kind of do what they want to do, right? So even today, we've seen Trump in the White House, mainly his press secretary, Kayleigh McSmarmy. I don't know what her last name is. But anyway, they were trying to walk it back, saying that he didn't mean what he meant. Oh, no. He definitely said what he said. Listen, we're going to get into some of those things and plus some other ways in which Trump is going to try to manipulate the election. As like I said, we are less than 2 months away. Whether or not he's going to try and instigate some sort of foreign intervention, absolutely on the table. Whether or not he's going to try and rush out some version of a coronavirus vaccine just a mere couple of weeks before Election Day. Yes, all that's definitely on the table. Also, what we're going to talk about today is presidential hopeful Joe Biden. He made an appearance today in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Joe Biden, I don't think he's doing a good job of reading the room, everybody. He showed up in Kenosha and still talked about how he would arrest looters in Joe Biden's America. I'm not sure he's getting the point. Also on the agenda, we're going to talk about the big progressive victory for Ed Markey in Massachusetts, the incumbent senator holding off a not so formidable challenge from a Kennedy in Massachusetts. The first time a Kennedy has lost a primary in the state of Massachusetts, I believe, ever. In definitely a good long time, at least 70 years. So interesting things to get back into in terms of what we're going to get into on Stir Crazy today. Of course, we always love to hear from you in the chat, in the comments. Anything you got to say, go on, drop it in there. James Daly is off. Molly Shaw is filling in for him. So thank you, Molly. We appreciate your help out there. And now it's time to bring in our fantastic panel. That's our panel.
What's up?
Andrew.
We got the dynamic duo today. Dynamic duo.
That's right. We are going to be Ashford and Simpson. We are going to be Sonny and Cher. Who are some other good duos, male-female duos?
I'm not sure about male-female, but one of my favorite bands is a duo, and they're called Death from Above 1979. That's another duo. Bass player, drummer. That's it. That's all you need.
I agree. I'm all a big fan of the rhythm section. Yes, you guys, this is our panel today. Visuals and research producer Andrew Corkery. But Andrew, you are more than enough, I believe. We had a guest that was scheduled to be with us, had to drop off at the last minute. So that's why it is just going to be the two of us today on this Thursday. And
got plenty of sound bites of Biden and all sorts of people for everyone to look forward to in the show today.
Well, you know, Andrew, that Trump soundbite to set it off, I think is pretty ominous. And, you know, Donald Trump doesn't make any illusions about his intentions to possibly even remain in power. Number one, regardless of whether or not he loses the actual election in November, but he's even made, allusions to staying in for 12 years. You remember during the RNC, he was like, don't say 4 more years, say 12 more years. That'll drive him crazy. And it's like, he says this tongue in cheek, but he means that shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what the liberal media kind of gets wrong. And like, they don't take Trump's, moronic statements to be as threatening as they actually are. I mean, like he really does believe this stuff, and just sort of like this jovial tone that he talks in all the time, and this kind of crass-minded, shoot from the hip tone that he has, kind of obfuscates the reality in which he's living in which he actually thinks it's possible for him to do that. And what we're seeing is a battle between the institutions of American society, and whether or not they're going to hold up against Trump in this election is, really remains to be seen at this point. And at this point in time, I mean, Trump is really just pulling out all the stops. This voting, twice issue that he brought up yesterday is just the latest iteration of what Trump has been doing to undermine the election actively. And there's a whole list of a myriad of things that he could do in order to undermine the election. For example, one of the things was in the 2000 election that he could be building his response to an election loss off of, which is the fact that the state Republican governors around the country, he could call all of them up and say, don't validate the election and don't give your electoral members from the Electoral College the ability to vote for for the candidate that actually received those electoral votes. And instead send those votes to me. And if you don't, I'll cut funding for your state, or I'll do all these other things that he does constantly when he threatens, anyone outside of the purview of what Donald Trump represents in terms of his politics, and anyone outside of what he's looking to do at that particular time. So this is just one example of it. And it's scary times we're living in.
Well, Trump is certainly being enabled by a cabal of evil assholes. I mean, there's no shortage of fucking dickheads running around the White House and in all throughout Washington in appointed positions. And one of those is the Department of Justice Attorney General Bill Barr, Wolf Blitzer. Now, I am loath to give CNN credit for much, but Wolf at least had the moxie to follow up with Bill Barr when asked about Trump's illegal advice, basically, to his supporters, encouraging them to vote twice. And then Bill Barr just came off like the biggest unqualified, apathetic, disconnected POS that you've ever heard. Dwayne, let's take a listen to that clip, Bill Barr on CNN with Wolf Blitzer.
North Carolina's absentee voting system. He said, and I'm quoting him right now, so let them send it in and let them go vote. And if the system is as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. That sounds like he's actually encouraging people to commit a crime, to vote twice.
I'm sorry, you'll have to read that again.
All right, this is what he said. So let them send it in, the email, the voting by mail, and let them go vote the ballot. Let them send in the ballot, and then let them go vote. And if the system is as good as they say it is, then obviously they won't be able to vote. It sounds like he's encouraging people to break the law and try to vote twice.
Well, I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it seems to me what he's saying is he's trying to make the point that the ability to monitor this system is not good. And if it was so good, if you tried to vote a second time, you would be caught if you voted in person.
That would be illegal if they did that. If somebody mailed in a ballot and then actually showed up to vote in person, that would be illegal.
I don't know what the law in the particular state says.
You can't vote twice.
Well, I don't know what the law in the particular state says and when that vote becomes final.
Is there any state that says you can vote twice?
Well, there's some, maybe that you can change your vote up to a particular time. I don't know what the law is, so I'm not going to offer.
He was saying test the system.
If you know what he's saying, why are you asking me what he's saying?
He doesn't believe in the mail-in voting. You're the Attorney General of the United States.
Why don't you? Yeah.
Wow, what a shit show.
Bill Barr said, the fuck you asking me for? Well, since Bill Barr does not seem to know what the laws are in the state of North Carolina and pretty much the laws in all 50 states, no, you cannot vote twice. That is a felony. And the person who is in charge of elections in North Carolina, the state official that is, put out a memorandum today, actually, to make sure that there was no doubt as to whether or not you could vote twice. Dwayne, pop that up. We actually have that. It is a statement released by the North Carolina Board of Elections. and the lady's name is Karen. Now, listen, we know Karens have been getting a bad rap over these past several months, and I have no idea what kind of Karen the Karen who was running the North Carolina Board of Elections is, but damn it, this Karen was 100% did what had to be done. Dwayne, if you don't pop up in that memo, me and you was going to fight in like 60 seconds, maybe 30. It depends. I don't know how long my patience is going. If you don't pop that memo up. Anyway, but it was made clear today by North Carolina state officials that no, you cannot vote twice. And I think it's sad, Andrew, that officials actually have to go through and say things like that because Donald Trump is so comfortable spreading falsehoods of all kinds. Here we go. A message from Karen. Well, boo. I thought it was the whole shebang. It's okay. Okay. Well, yes, a message from Karen. Basically, she said it is a felony to vote twice in North Carolina, especially if you're trying to do it intentionally. With intent was absolutely part of that. So, but don't forget, guys, I mean, Donald Trump has convinced some of his supporters to take hydroxychloroquine, an unproven treatment for COVID, and some people actually died as a result of that. Medical professionals had to remind Trump supporters not to drink bleach after he made that suggestion from the White House that was possibly a treatment for the coronavirus. Andrew, what are the chances that a not insignificant number of North Carolinians are going to do exactly what Donald Trump suggested there, even though he and his representatives are suggesting now, the day after, that he was making those comments in jest?
I would say it's pretty high. I mean, this is what Trump does. This is part and parcel of his whole rhetorical and electoral strategy, which is to say that there's a problem, be presented with the media that there's not a problem, and then subsequently create a problem so that he can try to prove the media wrong and get his base to follow him. And this particular incident with the voting situation in North Carolina is incredibly emblematic of that, in the sense that if Trump is presented with the media's facts and numbers showing that people voting 2 times is actually not a problem that the United States government has at this time, if he can get his people to vote twice and get some of them trumped up on felonies, he can then say that, oh, yes, we do have a problem with people voting twice. And then he can then try to absolve himself from actually, playing a role in creating that felony Kafkaesque nightmare that is what's going to happen in North Carolina as a result of what Trump is outlining. It's crazy.
What do I want, Dwayne? Yes, whatever. Yes, see, thank you. Look at Dwayne coming through. Bow. This is what she had to say. Shout out to Karen. Karen, representing the North Carolina Board of Elections. Karen said, hey, motherfuckers, don't forget, it is illegal to vote twice in an election. That makes it a class, put your ass in jail felony, class 1 felony for a voter with intent to commit a fraud to register or vote at more than one precinct or more than one time in the same primary or election. Attempting to vote twice in an election or soliciting someone to do so is also a violation of North Carolina law. I wonder if Karen is laying down the gauntlet to Trump. Challenge. If you are telling people that this is a practice that is okay, that is also punishable by law. Now, we know, obviously, that no one's going to bring these kind of charges against Trump, but sometimes he has to be reminded, dog, like a lot of these things that you want to do, Donald Trump, are highly illegal. The memo also goes on to say, on election day, voters who are voted absentee are removed from the poll book, which is updated before voting starts at 6:30 a.m. Absentee ballots that are received on election day are not counted after the election, and this prevents double voting. Also, the state board conducts audits after each election and checks voter history against ballots cast, and would also detect if someone tries to vote more than once in an election, because absentee ballots and early voting ballots are retrievable. Ooh, did you know that? If someone tries to get around the system, their ballot can be retrieved and not counted. so it will not affect the outcome of an election. Shout out to Karen. Karen said, don't play with my election, Donald Trump. So thankfully, there are some people who are out here trying to maintain a little semblance of order. But Andrew, you know, aside from outright stealing the election, as Donald Trump has threatened to do, has more than one occasion said that if he loses, he will not accept the results of the election. Joe Biden, like I said, to his credit, trying to come up with a little bit of plan. He said, well, we got to stick the military on Trump. And the military said, leave us out of this. If this is an issue of a constitutional crisis or a contested election, it is up to Congress and the courts to decide. I'm sorry, y'all, my eyes watering. Don't give me no attention. I'm not crying over Trump or Biden, but I have every right to if I so chose. But guys, Andrew, it's not a plural. It's not a plural on here today. It's just the two of us. The other way that Donald Trump could usurp this election, the outcome of this election, at least try to influence in a way, which something that we hope to God that he does not do, but not outside of his purview to do so, would be to start some sort of foreign entanglement. And you think that it could very well go down in the South China Sea with China, of all people. What's going on here?
Yeah, so basically, there was a really interesting Reuters report that came out that I encourage people to go check out. But the title of the report is "The Pentagon's Latest Salvo Against China's Growing Might: Cold War Bombers." So this kind of sets the scene here. On July 21st, two U.S. Air Force B-1 bombers took off from Guam and headed west over the Pacific Ocean to the hotly contested South China Sea. The operation was actually a part of the Trump administration's intensifying challenge to China's ruling Communist Party and its sweeping territorial claims over the world's most important strategic waterways. So, this is the Pentagon's latest plan to kind of ratchet up a possible war with China. Could this be Trump's October surprise? We don't know, but there's a lot of evidence to point to in this Reuters article that shows that it's at least strikingly very possible. So, the operation was part of the Trump administration's plan to intensify its militarization against China, while senior Trump officials launch, diplomatic and rhetorical broadsides against China. The U.S. Defense Department is now turning its firepower of its heavily armed long-range bombers as it sees it to a counter to Beijing's bid over the control of the South China Sea. And, since late January, actually, American B-1 bombers and B-52 bombers, usually operating in pairs, have flown about 20 missions over key waterways, including the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Sea of Japan, which are all hotly contested areas as to who controls the international waters in that region. As the risk of the conflict comes, like all these Western experts are doubting that these U.S. bombers would actually deliver a decisive advantage in a clash with China. And they warn that any militarization or any military action against China is not going to be a limited theater. This will be a world war. Like this is really, really scary shit that Trump could either try to pull before the election or in the intermeeting time, if he were to lose, before Joe Biden were able to take office.
Let me put this to the chat, guys, and even to you guys watching on Periscope, all 5 of y'all. I have no idea how many people are watching on Periscope. But no, question for the audience. Seriously, gang, do you guys think that it is beyond the pale for Donald Trump? I mean, of course, it would be beyond the pale. I guess you could say, is it beyond his capabilities? Is this beyond something that Trump would do in an act of desperation in order to try to maintain power, hold on to the presidential, office, to start a war with China? Now, Andrew, what's interesting about, the South China Sea is that the U.S. military has been doing maneuvers and exercises in that region since the Obama administration. I remember China was real pissed off with Obama, like, get the fuck out of our backyard, dog. Like, you don't live here. Like, we don't even know what you're doing over here. This ain't your neighborhood. And it's another extremely gross example of American imperialism. I mean, because just think, if China or Russia were to all of a sudden start doing exercises in the Gulf of Mexico, we would be shitting bricks. Like, it would be a problem. And
to be clear, too, to be clear, like the last time that actually happened, was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that almost launched the end of civilization as we know it, were it not for Kennedy and Khrushchev both pulling us back from the brink at the same time. So
it was a problem.
serious problem, to put it lightly.
It was a major problem. So obviously, this would be a continuation. I mean, not on engaging China in war, of course, but the act of these provocative, demonstrations of the U.S. military in China's sphere of influence is absolutely something that Trump is, I guess, continuing on from the previous administration. So this is definitely American policy, not just a Trump policy in this instance. Well, come on, Andrew. Do you think, is he? No, but he might be though. Is he that crazy?
he is that crazy. And also too, like you said it really well, Kim, like this is part and parcel of a strategy that's been going on since the Obama era and even back to the Bush years about how to negate the rising power of China. Now, basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to subvert the military might that China has in terms of its troops with some of these bombers and some of this infrastructure that they're putting in the region. But let's also be clear too that China is in no way completely absolved from the situation. They are trying to ratchet things up as well by creating like fake manufactured islands in the middle of the South China Sea, which are internationally, questionable, as like a lot of different, international bodies, the UN, other places have come out against China doing that. And they've also come out against Japan and other countries such as the Philippines, which are two countries that the United States is ostensibly trying to protect from China's influence by creating this further militarized situation and trying to up the ante on which, China thinks that it'll be too much to bear by continuing to build these islands and so forth. So I think that, we really have to look at this carefully and in a detailed manner, kind of going on in the background of everything that's going on domestically inside the U.S. Not to say that, again, this is going to 100% happen, but this is one of the ways that Trump and other authoritarian leaders, especially in the past, have kind of galvanized people behind them when the election process has kind of not really gone their way, or they feel like they're losing an election that they can get back into their hands if they were able to kind of dominate the news cycle with something like, some sort of military intervention or war in the region.
So everyone that's watching, we are in the DC, Maryland area. Andrew's in Baltimore. I'm outside Washington, DC. We have thunderstorms rolling through the area right now. Lots of thunder and lightning. Andrew, Dwayne wants to know, can you turn on some lights? Because
yeah.
The storm clouds have stolen away your natural light. So while Andrew gets the light on, just give me the light and pass the draw. Let me read some of the comments from the comments. Darth Tater says, Jesus. No, I'm sorry. He actually said Jesus. Jesus. All right. Jesus. Are y'all listening? I would not put it past Trump to put us in a hot war with China. No, I listen, Darth Tater, I don't put it past Trump to do that either. I laugh to try to use that as a defense mechanism to stop my brain from actually processing the reality of the situation, that we are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, without an oar, without a lifeboat, without a flashlight, without a cell phone. I mean, we are out here very much on our own in a whole lot of ways. So yeah, if Trump wants to start something with China, what are we going to do? We may not even be able to get him out of office should he lose the election. We are definitely in the throes of, I mean, I'm not trying to be, too hyperbolic here, but like, y'all, this is a dictatorship, right? Like, who gonna stop him? We're going to see what this looks like November 4th, November 5th, November 15th, December 1st. Like, I think that the situation is going to be getting realer by every passing week, every passing day, the closer we get to election day. But I think the real shit is going to jump off after election day. I believe it was 5 weeks from the 2000 election between Bush and Gore, right? 5 weeks transpired between the Florida recount, the Supreme Court challenges, until the eventual decision of Bush v. Gore by the Supreme Court, and then Al Gore finally conceding to George Bush. That was 5 weeks. Five. What do you guys think 5 weeks after Election Day is going to look like in the United States, especially given all the turmoil that has been happening, especially considering that police have refused to stop shooting unarmed people in the back? It's getting realer by the minute. Andrew, did you find yourself a light source? There we go. There we go.
I did. Just took me a minute. Thanks for giving me a break there.
all good. Let's see what else we have from the comments here. And don't forget, y'all, coronavirus. What y'all think coronavirus is going to be looking like come November, December? It's not going to be a pretty situation. Who else do we have here? Wait, that's the one I just read. Sorry, hold on. Darth Tater. And then Marge Ferguson says he's the Jim Jones of politics. His followers are like the suicidal sycophants in the Jonestown massacre. They're more dangerous. They'll shoot you with live bullets and paintballs, as they have proven. You know, Andrew, I mean, that is a disturbing, like, sort of twist on this whole scenario, is that these white supremacists, in addition, you know, the Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys, the Hot Boys, all these boys are showing up armed to the teeth, provoking protesters who are out there demonstrating against police violence. And Donald Trump is giving these groups like QAnon, winks and nods, like, hey, I hear you. I know you guys are my supporters. I don't know about these conspiracies, but if these people like me, it must be a good thing. What kind of factor, in your opinion, do you think the white supremacists are going to play in this fall's events?
That's what makes this particular moment so incredibly dangerous. I mean, Trump is terrible on his own and he's undermining these institutions, but Trump has basically been, part and parcel of this movement and has enabled this white supremacist movement to take a hold of our society. So, I mean, the fact that all these people are out there and they're ready to go, they're ready for war. I mean, these people in groups like QAnon and stuff like that, they see him as like the main leader to getting rid of like some fake, child pedophilia ring inside of the government that's controlled by literal demons. Like, this is like what these people believe in QAnon. And they have taken the reins of the right-wing movement in society, and who knows what the hell they're going to do with it. I mean, Trump has emboldened all these people. That's the worst part about Trump, is not even himself, but just Trumpism and this whole idea of worshiping him and kind of having that sycophant mentality about whatever he does is justifiable because the ends justify the means and so forth. And that's just brought out clearly in these groups like QAnon, the Proud Boys, all these people. And you're seeing him wink and wave and nod to all these people. And it can cause untold violence in our society. In America, we're really used to a level of stability that has really not been rivaled by any other country, since the end of World War II. And so to have that stability threatened by these right-wing movements is a really new, jarring development, and something that I hope wakes Americans up to the gravity of this moment that we're living in.
From the comments, Prince of Judah 79, friend of the show. Thank you, Prince of Judah. This country is already out of control. This election might be the final nail to all hell breaking loose. Yep. I saw, let me not lie, I didn't see it. I heard it. I can't verify it whether or not it's true, but I did hear that Black Americans are the number one demographic right now buying firearms. Makes perfect sense to me because the white supremacist is armed to the teeth, baby. Like, we know that they are sitting on some young baby arsenals. These folks have got the guns, they've got the ammo, they've got, the bulletproof everything, body armor, little grenade launch. I mean, they got the work. So no, if the situation goes south in America, one side is already very well armed. So I think other sides need to be proportionately armed as well. That is just my opinion. Andrew, I want us to move along. I'm debating on whether or not should we go to Kenosha with Joe Biden Or should we let's take a moment if we could, gang. There was an election last night. Yeah, I mean, a primary in the state of Massachusetts. And the big race that everyone was paying attention to was the Senate race, where incumbent Ed Markey faced a primary challenge from Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy III. This is a multi-generational Kennedy, a much younger candidate, looking a lot like the Kennedys of yore, the Teds and the Johns, etc. But you know, he had the backing of the establishment. Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Kennedy, but on the other side, can y'all hear this thunder? Because it is a little fucking nuts over here. So pardon moi if I have to keep looking around. I hope the lightning don't hit me in the head, but I digress. Supported by Nancy Pelosi, Joe Kennedy had the backing of the establishment. Ed Markey, on the other hand, was supported by people like Liz Warren, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and in a stomping, Andrew, it was a lot to a little. Ed Markey came out victorious over Joe Kennedy. The first time in 70 years that a Kennedy has lost a primary in the state of Massachusetts. That is what you call a dynasty. We are seeing these establishment dynasties fall in some places. I think Democratic voters are fed up. And if you present them with a progressive versus a centrist or Democratic moderate, they're going with the progressive. And I want us to take a listen, if we could, to a snippet of Ed Markey's victory speech as he addressed his supporters outside of Boston. Let's take a listen to that.
And no matter where I go across the state, you tell me you want something so basic, so simple, you almost shouldn't have to say it. You want your children to dream about the future instead of having to fear about the future. You want justice. You want justice for your children and for future generations. In this race, justice was on the ballot. Healthcare justice, that's Medicare for all and universal healthcare. Educational justice, so that every student has access to first-class schools and well-paid teachers. Economic justice, so that 3 billionaires don't hold more wealth than the bottom 50 percentile of our population combined. That's an economic system that's gone off the rails. Racial justice, so that we confront our history, make reparations, and root out the systemic racism that keeps us from achieving the promise of liberty and justice for everyone. Today and every day, we say Black lives matter, Black voices matter. And environmental justice, that's the Green New Deal. The one issue, combating the climate crisis which defines our future. Every other problem is linked to it. No solution to any challenge will be successful unless we address it. There will be no peace, no justice, and no prosperity unless we stop the march to climate destruction. This is a matter of life and death.
Senator Ed Markey there. Let me just remind you that Ed Markey, one of the authors of the Green New Deal, along with AOC, Andrew, I mean, shit, can we swap out Joe Biden for Ed Markey? Ed Markey is talking the language. He is saying the lyrics that I have been wanting to hear. I'm sure people in Massachusetts, especially progressives, are very glad the race turned out the way it did. I'm sure there was some doubt with Joe Kennedy being backed by the establishment. What is your take on what Ed Markey had to say there? I mean, because he was pretty much reading from the progressive script, was he not?
No, he totally was. And this illuminates the key difference between Ed Markey and people like Joe Biden, in that they are in sort of the same generational cohort, but you can see that one actually evolves on what their policy prescriptions are for society and what their values manifest in those policies. And so what you've seen with Ed Markey is that someone who was more conservative back in the 70s, who was like, you're pretty much your run-of-the-mill like liberal senator in the 1970s. But as society evolved and as people called for change from disenfranchised communities and places around the country, he got on board with those changes. For example, when he endorsed, Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, he got on board with those changes, and he changed the policy framework and the dynamic, and also the way that we look at in American politics the issue of climate change. The Green New Deal advanced our prescription and perspective on that issue, on what needs to be done in relation to climate change, and it expanded the left's argument as to what had to actually happen in our society. As where Joe Biden, in 1994, passes the crime bill, locks up, predominantly African Americans and people of color in this country for a generation, and then tries to skirt around the issue in debates, when he's running for president in 2020, changing his language and changing his issues as it relates to representation of people in his campaign by having people like Kamala Harris be his vice president, but not changing the structure of the policies of which he represents. And so I think that this issue and this particular race with Ed Markey versus Joe Kennedy was very illustrative of that. And also, too, was very illustrative of the fact that, now more than ever, progressives can continue to primary these centrist Democrats, because basically at this point, Nancy Pelosi supported Joe Kennedy in the primary against Ed Markey, who is a progressive, after she had vehemently said previously, when progressives were challenging centrist Democrats, that they couldn't challenge them in the primary system and that they had to accept that particular Democratic politician because it wasn't good for us to have infighting in the party and so forth. And she came out for Joe Kennedy forcefully, and she put her hand on the scale, and she tried to tip that as far to the centrist Democrats as she could by trying to get Joe Kennedy and the Kennedy dynasty in power. And we saw what happened. That didn't work. And so now the doors to the floodgates of progressive challengers are open across the Democratic Party, and we should forcefully push for that.
Yeah, and progressives in Massachusetts actually have a very good chance of filling Joe Kennedy's now vacant congressional seat with an actual progressive, because Joe Kennedy had to abdicate, so to speak, in order to pursue this Senate campaign. So there's an open congressional seat in Massachusetts. I guess maybe who's governor, maybe we'll appoint somebody. I don't know how that works in that specific instance, but they'll figure it out. So congratulations to Ed Markey, headed back to the Senate like a boss. Speaking of goofy old white guys, I couldn't think of a better transition. Joe Biden, y'all. Joe Biden made his way to Kenosha, Wisconsin in order to survey the scene and I suppose give his 2 cents on the situation. But before we get into what Biden had to say after visiting Kenosha, or while visiting Kenosha, I want us to hear from Jacob Blake's uncle. His name is Justin Blake. And just like Jacob Blake Sr., Jacob's father, they have been very vocal about not only what Mr. Blake Jr. has been enduring since being shot 7 times in the back by a Kenosha police officer and still being treated for paralysis among gunshot wounds, etc., still remaining in the hospital. But this is what Justin Blake had to say about what he hopes Joe Biden. Okay. Oh, okay. He said, don't go to that. Okay, well, fine. Well, then we'll go to goofy ass Joe Biden. I'm sure this is going to be tragic comedy, Andrew. That he says things that makes me laugh, but not like in a I feel good about laughing kind of laughing. Like I have to laugh in order not to sob. So can we go to Joe Biden in Kenosha?
The underlying racism that is institutionalized in the United States still exists, has existed for 400 years. And so what's happened is that we end up in a circumstance like you had here in Kenosha and have here in Kenosha. Well, I think we've reached an inflection point in American history. I honest to God believe we have an enormous opportunity now that the screen, the curtain's been pulled back on just what's going on in the country, to do a lot of really positive things. People are beginning to figure out who we are as a country. This is not who we are. This is not who we are. Barb, you talked about, rebuilding. Well, you know what? Let's get something straight here. Protesting is protesting, my buddy John Lewis used to say. But none of it justifies looting, burning, or anything else. So regardless how angry you are, if you loot or you burn, you should be held accountable as someone who does anything else, period.
I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with what I just heard. Joe Biden, again, talking about the system of oppression that Black Americans face and have faced for the past 400 years, as if he did not have a part to play in the continuing oppression of Black Americans with his policies while he was senator from the little state of Delaware for 30 plus years, and then spent another 8 years as VP. Joe Biden, you had a part to play in some of this oppression that you speak of and that you seem so heartbroken about. But Andrew, you know what pissed me off in that comment. First of all, you want to talk about looting and burning and this, that, and the third. That is not the issue here. And it goes to show you again how both political parties value property over people. They don't seem to be making the connection that people would not be out looting, burning, if police weren't still out here shooting and killing people, unarmed people, people who were walking away from them, people who are running away from them. That is the whole reason that people are out in the streets. And for Joe Biden to continually invoke the names of Martin Luther King and John Lewis, it really pisses me off, because to me, it's a very paternalistic sort of reference. Like, oh, don't you know John Lewis is kind of like y'all's daddy or y'all's granddaddy, and your daddy or granddaddy wouldn't be out here looting. He said looting is bad. So why are you out here looting? Joe, shut the fuck up, dog. You was not out here in the streets with John Lewis. You are not even close to anywhere John Lewis's level nor record on civil rights or criminal justice. So stop invoking him, because you aren't him. And not everyone who is Black agrees with that philosophy. And that is very evident. What is your takeaway from Joe Biden's Kenosha comments, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very emblematic of the voter base that he's going for in this election. I mean, he's obviously going for these more centrist, suburbanite, people to vote for him, and they're doubling down on going to the center as opposed to going to the left. Now, the problem with that is that when you want to try to actually galvanize and or take some energy from the movement for Black lives that we've seen play out in the streets since May, but you're just doing it in such a way to kind of placate people into thinking that you're on their side, and you're not actually having the policies behind it to back up what the movement is demanding. And so you can see this play out in real time when he says stuff like about the looting, because it shows you exactly the demographic of people that he's going for in the election, and shows you directly the demographic that he's written off, which is people on the left, people that are out on the streets, people who voted for Bernie Sanders and so forth. They want to get, moderate Republicans, these unicorns that exist out here somewhere. But these moderate Republicans that really love John McCain, they're into American exceptionalism, that sort of a thing. And so their campaign is emblematic of that voter base, and not of the broader calls that are coming from the streets to defund the police, to reallocate resources to communities of color and so forth. And the problem with this whole strategy is, number one, we already tried this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and it didn't work. She won the popular vote, but she didn't win the Electoral College, which that's what you have to actually win to win the election. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that it plays directly into Trump's hands, because it gets everyone talking about the looting and, the quote unquote violence of the protesters and so forth. And then that becomes the narrative. That becomes the story. And then the secondary story is the fact that people's lives are being upended by a generational system of white supremacy and racial suppression that exists in this country. That's the afterthought. When in reality, the afterthought should just be the looting and that sort of a thing, because that's not emblematic of what the whole movement looks like and or what they're seeking. It's a language of the unheard. people that don't have a seat at the table. This is why they're doing that, because they wouldn't get attention otherwise.
It's going to be an infuriating next several weeks as we go along to Election Day. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to have to hold their nose and vote for Joe Biden. And, that really sucks. And it is what it is. And we understand the existential threat that Trump has posed to this country, and specifically to Black people and to people of color, gay, queer, and trans people as well. I mean, Trump is in danger. I don't think that Joe Biden is quite the same level of danger, though Joe Biden is still unrepentant, seemingly, for a lot of the harmful policies that he has pushed forth, and seemingly wanting to distance himself and disconnect himself from the role that he has played in the continued oppression of Black folks. But when we speak of the oppression of Black folks, guys, no one is doing that better than the police. And I want us to look at some videos, actually from late last week, early this week of, hold on. I'm sorry. Dwayne told me that we do have the clip from Jacob Blake's uncle, Justin Blake. He said some very profound things. So let's go back to Kenosha and listen to what Mr. Blake had to say.
As bad as Jake is, he's alive. Their families aren't. So this is like a war. What happens after the first shot is fired? It becomes a strategical game and a strategical field of war. We're at war, so we fired the first shots. You don't think people would be upset enough after 300 years of being abused, discriminated against, would go burn down a building? Come on, there's going to be some people that feel that way. But now that that's over, let's get to the business of the day. Let's get some legislation, let's get some laws, and let's get some things in place that will protect us, so hereforward this won't go on. And the only way we can do that is do it strategically, go for laws, bills, and other things that will protect little Jakes all over this world.
And I hear Mr. Blake, and I hear him talking. At the same time, I feel like Black people in America are going to have to be voting for the next 1,000 years to get our true liberation at the fucking pace that this shit is going. And when he talks about laws, we need to get laws in place. Well, we have to have lawmakers, politicians, elected officials who have the will to pass these laws, who can stand up to police unions and fraternal orders of police, who put tremendous pressure on these lawmakers through money, through donating to their campaigns, or straight up bully tactics to dissuade them from pursuing legislation or voting for legislation that actually does make systemic change. There was a bill that just failed in the California Assembly right before the Assembly, shut down for the season, proposed by a Democrat, and it would have made it so that if a cop shoots and kills a civilian, that they would not be able to go and be a cop someplace else, right? You get one shot. You fuck up, you don't get to be a cop no more. You kill an innocent person, you don't get to be a cop no more. And that bill died. And a lot of these attempts at reform are very lukewarm. They're very tepid. They're very toothless at this point, Andrew. I mean, what kind of faith, you as a white person looking at this situation, as Black people looking at this situation, I mean, my God, like, what kind of faith do you think we should have in lawmakers' ability to fix the fact that police feel that they are completely justified in murdering, maiming, arresting, ruining the lives of Black people simply because they can?
I would have very little to no faith in that apparatus or that system. I mean, I think the key to understand is that the only major change we've ever gotten, whether it's civil rights or union rights or anything like that, either for African Americans or other people, is through mass mobilization and street protests and getting together to force people in power to accept the reality of changing the situation as it is. And so unless we have that continuing on a mass basis, the media and the politicians and the political class will continue to put off of these issues for years and years to come. It reminds me of this quote from James Baldwin, where he talked to the writer and intellectual, and he talked about how, how long is this going to take, for for you to accept our humanity, for you to accept African Americans' humanity in the society. Because it's taken my grandfather's time, it's taken my great grandfather's time, it's taken my parents' time, it's taken my time, taken my children's time, taken their children's time and their children's time. So how long do you want to wait for the systemic system of oppression to end before you can't deal with it anymore? I mean, what is the end date for Black liberation inside of the American capitalist system? When does that actually occur? And the problem is that these politicians try to placate. They don't try to solve the actual underlying structural issues that, in large part, I mean, there are some certain exceptions, people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but they are fighting, an inside-out strategy in where they're inside the machine and the apparatus that has created the conditions upon which African Americans are subjugated and oppressed in this society and have been for 400 years. So, they're dealing with the infrastructure and a system that is, inherently against what they're trying to do. So it's going to take some time in order to do that. But the problem is the more and more people believe that these piecemeal operations and these piecemeal laws and so forth are actually affecting and creating real systemic change, the more we're going to be in this sort of hyper feedback loop where nothing gets solved and the right wing gets empowered because basically in lieu of the neoliberals not being able to provide on their policies that they're articulating, the right wing gets the power because they culturally empathize with racists and white supremacists and so forth. And people who are downtrodden, whether they're white or Black, sometimes will go with some of those figures, particularly white working class people.
Let's go from another comment from the comments. Spot Check News says, we have been protesting cops in the streets for months. What does this clown do? He picks one as a running mate. Talking about Biden. Hilarious. If this does not tell you all you need to know about Biden, I don't know what will. Listen, Spot Check News. Spot Check News. We have been watching Kamala Harris for a long time, even before she was in the Senate. And I remember being very dismayed at her policy when she was the Attorney General for the state of California after the state had legalized marijuana. And she was like, bojangling on releasing people out of jail convicted on marijuana offenses. It's like, why do you want to keep these folks in jail? The law has now changed, and her reluctance and her feet dragging. Yeah, no, it was a lot. It was a lot for me that did not sit right with Kamala Harris.
And then she went on the Breakfast Club and then laughed about how she used to smoke weed. This is the representation aspect without the policies, and this is part and parcel of the neoliberal placation that's taken place.
Yes. Dwayne, do we have that DC police video? DC police fire flashbangs at protesters? Okay. I want us to play this video, guys. And again, now I'm just making it clear that this video is from a few nights ago, as we know that the protests in Washington, DC have been ongoing. They have not let up a single night. And people have been out there. You hear me? They have been out there in them streets doing battle with Metropolitan Police. When you see these clips and people start saying MPD, that's who they're talking about. That's what DC doesn't have a city police squad, so to speak. They're called Metropolitan Police. And there's a lot of police in DC. My God, just all the federal agencies alone have all their own little police departments, but that's another story. However, I want us to look at this video because a disturbing trend that I have noticed from looking at a lot of these protest videos is how the police intentionally attack the street medics, the people who are out there rendering aid to protesters who become injured while protesting, usually through munitions being fired at them by police or inhaling tear gas or a myriad of other ways that people get hurt while out there demonstrating for all of our liberation. And I want us to look at this video shot by Chuck Modiano. We love shooting, airing Chuck's videos because, again, Chuck has been out there with them people every single night. So let's look at this real quick if we could.
You're not a medic, do not next to me, all right? Back up! You're not a medic, go! You're not a medic, please back up! You're a street medic from New York City. This is what's up. This is what they do. This is what they do. We got a guy on the ground being treated. We got a guy on the ground being treated for a rubber bullet injury, and then they throw a flashbang. That's nothing. That's not even top. It looks like a little metal thing. That's what it looks. Is that the flashbang? Yeah, that's just a flashbang. What it is? It's a fucking little metal thing, and the gas comes out of it. Yeah. You gotta throw. Yeah, something like that. You gotta throw that shit back. Are you okay? You
Christina and then beat me up.
What's up?
They took Christina, then beat me up.
They took Christina.
Yeah,
they arrested her.
Yeah, and I was trying to get her, and they just hit me with the gun twice.
They drew the gun. Your face was fucked up.
I'm all right though.
You need a medic. You need medic.
I went to the medic 7 times. I told him I'm a medic. I'm a trained medic in DC. I'm all right. We do it all. I just don't want to know why they shooting and hitting us. We ain't done nothing. We just lighting off fireworks. Trump lit off fireworks yesterday, man. They not hitting and doing nothing to him.
We need
this
one.
shit just make me sad, dog.
No intention. Okay? What happened?
Clearly, police trying to escalate a lot of the situations happening there out in DC. And I definitely want to send the condolences out from us here at Stir Crazy to the family of Deon Kay. The 18-year-old was allegedly shot in the back by DC police last night in Southeast Washington. The video from that shooting has been released, at least the body cam video has been released. I have not seen it. I'm looking at social media. It's not good, is it, Dwayne? They shot him in the chest, not in the back. So they said he had a gun in his hand. Okay, well, that's some of the stuff. I'm seeing different reports on social media. So let me look at the video myself before I render an opinion. But at the same time, protesters are already out and about. They may not have been out in this rain, but we saw members of the Sunrise Movement walk towards and stand out in front of DC Mayor Muriel Bowser's house at 6:30 this morning. So streets are definitely watching what the police are doing out here. And it's unfortunate that another young Black person had to lose their life at the hands of police. Andrew, I'm gonna let you get the last word before we say goodnight to the good folks out here.
Yeah, I just say, solidarity with the struggle. And I think, when it comes to Miriam Bowser and other people like that who are mayors across the country, we've seen people in the wake of the killing of George Floyd in government, really pay attention to the Black Lives Matter movement and then start, using some of their language and using some of, the taxpayer money to, fund, for example, in DC, the Black Lives Matter, paint job that they have like on the sidewalks and everything like that. And on the streets where Black Lives Matter is directly painted in the middle of the street per the government. And that just, again, goes into this neoliberal placation game that they love doing where they try to give solidarity, but they're unwilling to actually act on the policies like, dealing with these police unions, ending qualified immunity, making it so that people who have track records of domestic violence or white supremacy inclinations and or membership to some of these groups, that they're not in the police force. These are some of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement is demanding, and that other people who are on the streets in solidarity with them are demanding. And we've seen once again that, with this incident that you just raised, Kim, we've seen that these police are still out here terrorizing people and terrorizing communities of color. And this neoliberal placation game is not going to work so long as the systemic challenges that African Americans and people of color and the working class in America face are not addressed and are not solved. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I want us to also keep in mind the fact that, Kyle Rittenhouse was 17 years old, illegally toted a gun across state lines, was carrying it out in the open, which is against the law in the state of Wisconsin for minors to do. And he allegedly shot and killed 2 people at a protest, was allowed to leave the protest and leave the state.
Given some water as well.
Without injury.
Police. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Without injury. And this young man, Deon Kay, if he was carrying a gun, he had to pay for it with his life. So there are 2 systems of justice. Well, let me rephrase. There's a system of justice, and then there's a standard system of injustice for Black and brown people in America. And we, as Black people, are taught this. We can't do what white folks do. Okay. And I would love for it to get to a point where that is not the case, where we get to act just like white people. No, but where Black people are allowed to live in the instances where now they are executed on the spot. We just want to live and have due process like white folks, like Kyle Rittenhouse sitting in jail for 2 counts of murder and being able to face charges and have a case brought against him, instead of what happened to Mr. Deon Kay, whose family is now going to be planning his funeral. So that's all I wanted to say. Listen, gang, tomorrow is First Nation Friday. Of course, we are joined with our crew of Indigenous ladies, Johnny J, Desiree Kane, Jen Deerenwater. Please join us tomorrow for that. Let me thank everyone who does work here on Stir Crazy. Thank you so much, Dwayne Gladden, Molly Shaw filling in for James Daly, Kelly McAdams, Taylor Hebden, Babatunde Ogunfalaju helping us out today, and Andrew, of course, all your help as always. So thanks everyone who does some work on Stir Crazy. I'm your host, Kim Brown. See y'all tomorrow. Be safe. Thank you.